Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Sports Room. Today, we're going to do a special Just Vikings episode. I've got a good friend of mine, Matt. Introduce yourself, bro.
Yeah, my name is Matt Anderson, host of Vikings Happy Hour on Climb in the Pocket. I've done some writing for Vikings Wire, for Daily Norseman, so I'm just excited to talk Vikings football with you, man.
No, I really appreciate it. I mean, I reached out to Matt a few weeks ago. We've been trying to find the right time to do it. Obviously, different time zones, people are busy, but we found a little 20, 30-minute slot, so we're going to try and squeeze as much as possible in. Um, I mean, you've been going to camp, right? So I just want to straight off the bat, how have we looked as a unit? Just, I mean, all three phases of the game, how have the Vikings looked?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll get rid of the special teams part of it first because that's not the fun one to always talk about. But special teams has looked just about as good as you could hope for. Najee Thompson has obviously made a huge impact this year in just a couple preseason games that we've seen from him as the gunner. Um, to be determined on kind of what the punt return, kick return situation looks like. With Kene Nwangu obviously still kind of hurt, that job is up in the air. And then punt return is kind of a camp battle between Brandon Powell and Jalen Rager. But not concerned about special teams. Defense, you know, a lot of what we've heard from camp is that it's an aggressive unit, very blitz heavy. They're disguising their looks a lot. Um, so I think that's promising. We really won't know what that defense looks like though until we get out on the field. But we've got some flashes from players as well. Obviously, Brian Murphy Jr. is as advertised with the free agent signing from the Cardinals this past offseason. Marcus Davenport has kind of flashed a little bit, though he's not being talked about as much. Daniil Hunter seems to be kind of doing his thing. And then obviously the big storyline on the defensive side of the ball is Ivan Pace. Um, Undrafted free agent, has done just a really phenomenal job adjusting on the fly, learning the scheme, stepping in, taking advantage of an opportunity with Brian Asamoah being out with that shoulder injury. So the defense, there's a lot of potential there. It's kind of a boomer bust unit, and I think I'm excited for it. But the reason that we talked pre-show a little bit why training camp feels a little bit special this year, and the reason is because this offense should be good. This offense is built with a really good quarterback in Kirk Cousins, regardless of if you like the guy or not. He's an upper tier quarterback, not with the Burrow Mahomes Allen type, but he's right there behind him. And he's got a plethora of weapons. I mean, Justin Jefferson is the best receiver in the NFL. KJ Osborne is for some reason underrated, and Jordan Addison is coming in, and he could be in play for Rookie of the Year, depending on how the quarterbacks play and how much usage Jordan Addison gets. But yeah, it's special because we have so many weapons, and it's just fun to see highlight clips, right?
Well, thanks for coming to the podcast, guys. I feel like you've basically covered absolutely everything, so we're done.
Did I just do it all?
You just did it all. You just did it all. But obviously, I've got a few specific things I want to talk about, and you touched on a few of
For
them. One
sure.
of them being Brian Flores' defense. Is it as aggressive as being advertised? Because that's on the complete other side of the spectrum to what it was last year. Last year, it looked like a lot of conservative, keep it in front of us type defense. Are we actually going after it this year? Does it look like blitzes are coming from all different directions? Pressure could come from anywhere. Does it look as exotic as it did when Mike Zimmer was calling the defense, for example?
Yeah, I mean, from everything that we've heard about in training camp, we're led to believe that that's how it's probably gonna be. Just kind of that aggressive disguise, heavy blitzing. I think they want to be the tone setters instead of letting teams just kind of walk all over them like last year. But unfortunately, like with even preseason so vanilla in what teams kind of show each other, and it's really more for players trying to make the roster. So while we're hearing all these things, we really won't know until week one, week two, whatever, when they have real live reps against real teams when the games actually matter. But I think things are trending upward, so we can hope maybe.
Really quickly, because something that's not really been spoken about much is Are we sticking with the 3-4 defensive front, or have we reverted back to a 4-3?
Yeah, I think I remember back when Brian Flores was first introduced. I think the scheme is 3-4, but teams so often spend time in nickel formations these days that it really is just kind of a plethora of things. So I think their base defense will always kind of be that 3-4, especially with Brian Flores historically. But you'll see 4-3, you'll see nickel, just a variety of different defensive schemes. It's gonna. I think the one quote that stuck out to me is it'll depend week to week on who they're facing, and I think that's a good approach for Brian Flores and the Vikings.
Another thing you touched up on, of course, is of course Byron Murphy has looked absolutely incredible in training camp. I mean, he looks like Xavier Rhodes when Xavier Rhodes was. I mean, he looks absolutely incredible. Every rep that you see of him, it's him being touch tight to whichever wide receiver it is, including Justin Jefferson. And going up against Justin Jefferson on a weekly basis is only going to make you better. But the more important one, not more important, but the one that I wanted to talk about was Marcus Davenport. How does he look replacing Za'Darius Smith on the other side of Danielle Hunter? How has Davenport looked? I know he struggled with injuries a little bit, but has he looked healthy? Has he looked good? Has he looked explosive? Talk to us about Marcus Davenport.
Yeah, the thing with Marcus Davenport is when he came out of college, he was kind of that raw, high potential athlete, and that's what the Saints were betting on. And there were a few seasons where they got that right when he wasn't injured. I think 2019 he had, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he was up there with pressures, with sacks, and even 2021 he had a very good season as well. I think we're seeing that type of stuff in training camp. I think he's got the explosiveness. He's got the size and length and power and speed, everything that you would kind of want in a pass rusher. He's got it. The key will be, can he stay healthy? And if he can, then Hunter in Davenport, that's a fantastic 1-2 punch that will really help the whole defense. Because if one of those guys goes down or Davenport doesn't quite live up to that potential, I think we could be in a world of hurt for the Vikings defense this year.
No, of course, because you need two things to kind of work hand in hand to have a good defense. You need to get pressure on those guys to relieve the pressure on the cornerbacks. And I'm going to cycle on to the next question, which I had, or the next. Our weakness over the last few years has been the cornerback position. And yes, Byron Murphy has come in, but it looks like we're still going to be relying on a lot of those younger guys: Mekhi Blackman, Caleb Evans, Andre Booth. So we know what Byron Murphy brings to the table. How have those other guys looked? And is it something that can at least keep us afloat in games? Because we know what our offense is going to bring to the table. Our offense is going to hit 25, 30, 40 points a game. Can our defense at least halt the bleeding even a little bit from what you've seen from those young guys?
Yeah, I'm hoping so. I mean, we've seen promising stuff out of Mekhi Blackman, who we took this year in the draft. I think Andrew Booth as well. I mean, we talk about injuries with Davenport. The same thing is applicable to Andrew Booth Jr. I think the talent is there. And I've actually seen some improvement in the first few preseason games from him. Caleb Evans, we haven't really heard much of, which I think is a good thing. I think no news is kind of good news on him. I think he's handling his reps well. But obviously the storyline is who's going to step up behind those two. We heard Jojuan Williams, the former second-round pick from the New England Patriots, started camp off strong and is now kind of regressed a little bit from everything that we're hearing. But I think the storyline in the cornerback group is definitely Mekhi Blackman and just what he's shown throughout. I know he got the injury the other week, but what he's shown thus far in training camp has been really great stuff from a rookie, and someone needs to step up in that group. So if it's not going to be Andrew Booth, then Mekhi Blackman is here. I also wouldn't be surprised, though, with cutdown day coming up in a few days, if this team looks to target a cornerback via trade or even free agent. There's some guys out there still that I've looked at with some of my co-hosts of Vikings Happy Hour, and Logan Ryan is a cornerback that stands out to me just because he's got familiarity with Brian Flores. He's a veteran, and I think that's the one thing this group is kind of missing is just a veteran leader. And I'm not saying Byron Murphy can't be that because he definitely is. He's been in the league for how many years? But when you look at the historically some of the Vikings cornerback units, we've had a Terrence Newman, we've had a Patrick Peterson, some of those really savvy vets that have done it for a long time. But yeah, I would say Mekhi Blackman for sure though is the name to keep an eye on.
Last thing on the defense before we get to the exciting stuff on offense. Has Ivan Pace been as good as advertised? Like, do you think he can go from undrafted free agent to I guess someone who can replace Eric Kendricks, who's been almost a decade one of the best middle linebackers in the league? I mean, has he shown that level of promise? I know that's a big stretch to compare him to a former All-Pro middle linebacker, but like, how good has he looked in comparison?
Yeah, I always will struggle comparing people to Eric Kendricks because he was one of my favorite players here for a very long time, as probably many others. But when you think about Ivan Pace, I mean, everything that he's done to this point has been impressive, but it shouldn't surprise people. Like, this was exactly kind of how he played in college. And when I was down in the Senior Bowl back in late January, early February, he was a guy that really stood out to us. Now, the knock on him was that he was kind of undersized, couldn't really, help you out in pass coverage situations and whatnot. But everything we've seen, even in the preseason game, his read and react ability has been way above what you could ever ask for from an undrafted free agent. His speed, he's always near the ball, always. If it's a run play to the outside, if it's a a quick pass, he's always near the ball in some capacity, which I think is a strong trait for a linebacker. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting to kind of watch that linebacker group unfold because we went from not having like any speed in the linebacker group to all of a sudden having Brian Asamoah and Ivan Pace, who I don't know if the team will put them together on the field at any given point. My guess is they will overlap at some time. But yeah, it's a night and day difference from what we're used to as Viking fans, which is the classic Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr unit.
Anthony Barr, yeah, that kind of stuff. So
he's still floating
onto
around
the
there
offense.
somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I mean, I think he's still I think he's still a free agent. I don't think he's been picked up yet.
No.
Onto the offense, right? I mean, it looks like the offense has picked up right where it left off last year. I mean, the offense pretty much dragged us to 13 wins last season, and it looks like we're exactly where we are. And for the first time, Kirk Cousins and this offense has continuity at head coach and play caller, because over the last 4 years, our offensive coordinator is, getting taken to other jobs or getting fired or whatever the case may be. I want to go to Jordan Addison, right? First of all, how good is he, and how does he change our offense going forward?
Yeah, I think he has the potential to be. I'm trying to figure out like a good comparison. I've heard Devonta Smith from the Eagles, but he's got a chance to be really good. I mean, we kind of looked at the wide receiver group on our show throughout the offseason, and he was a name that consistently came up because what he did before he transferred to USC was, at Pittsburgh was really impressive. His route running ability, his ability to play inside, outside. He's good with his hands. He's good with you've seen some of the sideline catches already. And so if he can continue to gain confidence, which he is, we saw the highlight play today in the back of the end zone. I mean, he's just showing out. And when players show out to that level in training camp, in practice, you have a pretty good indication that they're going to be something in the NFL. But as far as what he can bring to our offense, last year I feel like this team really missed kind of what we thought Adam Thielen was going to be. And Adam Thielen and what he did for Minnesota over the course of his career was incredible. And he deserves to go down as one of the top Viking wide receivers, maybe not top 5, but up in that tier. But last year he just seemed to kind of lose a step, and he wasn't really taking advantage of the double teams that Justin Jefferson was getting. And so the Vikings, I think, noticed that early on, and that's why they made the move for T.J. Hawkinson. And T.J. Hawkinson stepped in and did a phenomenal job. Well, now you have Jordan Addison as well, and KJ Osborne, which I don't want to sleep on him because I think he is another key to this offense really exploding this year. But when you have all of those weapons, you just really put pressure on the defense, because if they're going to truly double cover Justin Jefferson, which go ahead, what are you going to do with the rest of our weapons? Like, you're going to have to single cover them, and somebody, I would bet money, whether it's Hawkinson, Osborne, or Addison, is going to beat that coverage. One of them will on every given play. So it really just adds another element, another threat to the offense. We've talked about it ad nauseum, but this offense has potential to be top 5 in the NFL, assuming, which I assume you'll ask this at some point, but assuming the offensive line actually holds up.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't speak about the Vikings without speaking about, in particular, that interior offensive line, because we've got studs on the outside. I mean, Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw are elite. I mean, they're one of the best duos at tackle in the league, but then for some reason, for about a decade, our interior offensive line has just been terrible. But going back to the Jordan Addison thing, I mean, one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to carry on double covering Justin Jefferson and leave someone else open, or they're going to need to, be more fair in their coverage and leave Justin Jefferson one-on-one. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest benefits for Jordan Addison as a rookie. We saw it with Juju Smith at Pittsburgh in his rookie season when Antonio Brown was out there. Obviously, everyone's double covering Antonio Brown, and then now Juju looks like this incredible number 1 wide receiver. So, I think without a doubt, the Vikings, even with a questionable interior offensive line, can be a top 5 offense in the league. We were 7th last year, and Kirk Cousins was on the ground after almost every single play. So if we can kind of maneuver that, I'm pretty sure we'll be okay. I wanted to speak to you about the wide receiver group once more. I don't know how many you think we're going to keep, but assuming it's 5 or 6 that we keep, who do you think are going to be the other 2 or 3 after Addison, Justin Jefferson, and KJ Osborne? Who do you think has the best chance to remain
behind those guys? Yeah, so I looked historically on kind of what we kept for wide receivers, and it does vary. I have it up here in front of me here. In 2022, we only kept 5 receivers. 21, obviously different era, but we kept 6, and in 2020 we kept 7. I'm kind of on the fence with how they're going to handle this position. My guess, though, is they're going to keep 5, and okay. I think the guys that make it. Yeah, I think the guys that make it behind, Addison, Jefferson, and Osborne is for sure Jalen Nailor. I think they loved what they saw from him last year. I know the injury has kind of kept him away from training camp, but he is back practicing now. I think the team believes in him as kind of that true deep threat because he's got that speed to do it. The other one that I think has made a case for having a roster spot is Brandon Powell. And I think if I were a betting man, we're going to do a 53-man prediction on our show later this weekend. But if I was a betting man, I would say that Brandon Powell makes this team over a Jalen Reagor, over a Tristan Jackson. I think he is shown to be super explosive in and out of his cuts. He's obviously an asset, not only as a kick returner, but a punt returner. And he knows Kevin O'Connell's system. He came from the Rams with Sean McVay, so he's got a little bit of an idea of what's going on in the offensive scheme. He's got familiarity with the coaches and Wes Phillips and Kevin O'Connell. So I think if I put my money on it today, what is this, Thursday? I'm going to say Jalen Naylor and Brandon Powell are the two backups behind the trio of Jefferson, Addison, and Osborne. Though a sneaky play, if they do keep 6, would be Tristan Jackson. I don't think Jalen Reagor makes the team.
Okay, see, that's the one I wanted to speak about specifically, because I find it hard to see our 53-man roster without Reagor in it. Simply because he's looked really solid in camp, and he made a few decent catches last year. He got open a few times. Second year in the system, he knows the playbook. I just feel like I don't know. I just don't see a team. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that Jalen Reagor doesn't make the 53-man roster, especially because he was on returns as well, punt return a few. I mean, it's going to be interesting, because when you have that many good level or decent level wide receivers after your first 3, it's difficult. I mean, I wouldn't want to be one of the coaches making those decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we've touched on it already. Interior offensive line. Do you think we finally bring somebody in to help that group? I mean, is that something that we're leaning towards? Because, I mean, even in camp, they've looked like they've just been toyed around. I mean, every joint practice that we've had with pads, Bradbury's getting thrown around, Ingram's getting thrown around. I mean, the only one that I haven't seen on his back is Ezra Cleveland. I mean, everyone else just seems to be on their back every single time. So, I mean, please give me some good news. I mean, does it look like we might even be thinking about it? I mean, how's that looking?
So we obviously know that they brought in Dalton Reisner for a visit at one point. Maybe that's the move they make if they don't feel comfortable after this weekend. I don't know who's going to play this weekend. I imagine they'll put Ed Ingram back out there, maybe for a series or two. So maybe you'll get a good feel for it. But yeah, I mean, you bring up the biggest concern on the offense, and that is, will that interior offensive line hold up? Now, Bradbury played his tail off last year. He had a career year, and we felt it when he did inevitably get hurt towards the end of the season. So there's a reason that they brought him back, and I think that we can probably trust him to be a top half of the league center for us. Obviously, when you're going up against bigger, nose tackles and whatnot, that's going to pose a challenge for Bradbury given his size. But I'm not so much concerned there. I am a little bit concerned about left guard and right guard. But I'm trying to give a benefit of the doubt that it's all going to be the same unit, which is something we haven't had here in a very long time. And there's something to be said about having that continuity across the offensive line, knowing what the person next to you is going to do in certain situations. When you're plugging and playing guys, you don't always know those tendencies. And so it makes it really difficult for offensive linemen to sort of read and react and know what's going on to their left and to their right. But yeah, I'm still torn on what they're going to do, because if you don't go get Dalton Reisner, you're most likely making a trade, because that's the only other way you're getting a starting quality guard. Now, what they could do is they could look to just go and get a backup. But I've liked what I've seen out of Blake Brandel, who they moved from tackle to guard this year. I thought he played very well in the last preseason game. I thought his footwork was good. I thought his point of attack was good. The way he was able to diagnose and pick up stunts was also just a really good thing that you would want to see out of a player like that. Tackles, I'm not so concerned with. Even backups. I know Oli Udoh got some heat the other week, but listen, Oli Udoh is Oli Udoh, and we know what he's going to bring to the table if he has to play. I kind of compare him to a lesser Phil Lodeholt back in the day. Like, you'll take the good with the bad, but know that he'll be serviceable. Now, that's kind of mean to Phil Lodeholt, because Phil Lodeholt was better than Oli Udoh, so I should just clarify that right there. But yeah, it'll all depend on the interior offensive line. I wish I could give you more more hope. But I think we're all just kind of crossing our fingers and hoping that it pans out.
Just really quickly on TJ Hawkinson. I mean, there's been the illness. Now there's the injury, and then all of a sudden, he wants to reset the market for tight ends. First of all, do you think the Vikings pay him what is being rumored? And I mean, what's the situation over there?
Yeah, I mean it's tough because we heard yesterday that he wants to reset the market, and as it stands today, the top three paid tight ends are probably the top three tight ends in football when you think about Darren Waller, George Kittle, and Travis Kelce, and even Mark Andrews could be thrown up in there, and I think he's in that tier of about $14-ish million a year, with Darren Waller being 17. So if it's true that T.J. Hawkinson and his reps really want to reset the market at the tight end group, that means you're talking more than $17 million a year for a tight end who, while he is phenomenal receiving, I don't know if he's where you want him to be from a blocking perspective. He's not like George Kittle and in Travis Kelce. Like, they can not only block, but they're just elite pass catchers as well. I think Hawkinson sort of misses that second half, but at the same time, you just signed Josh Oliver to what, $13 million a year? And so if you think he's worth that, but you think TJ Hawkinson's better, there's got to be some. I mean, that's your range, right? You got to be paid more than 13, but you don't want to pay him more than 17. So there's going to have to be some give here on somebody's side. I don't think the Vikings will budge from, kind of where they're positioned and where they value TJ Hawkinson at. And I know the franchise tag for him next offseason would be about 12-ish million. So if I'm TJ Hawkinson, I'm probably trying to push for more and then maybe just accepting whatever the Vikings give. But it's an interesting storyline to watch. I had assumed it would already kind of be taken care of by this point, and I don't know if you believe in the conspiracy theories going on with TJ Hawkinson, but I don't necessarily buy the ear infection and
I don't think it's some sort of he's just trying to do the whole contract thing. I don't buy that one bit. I mean, it's not like he's pushing for a contract this year and saying I'm not going to play if I don't get my contract this year. I mean, that's obviously not the case. The only
Right.
thing I would say is, I mean, maybe he feels like he has a little bit of leverage because we traded a second round pick for him. So it's kind of you don't want to have that situation where you have a player on a 1.5 year loan or 1.5 year kind of rental, and not give him the contract, and he just walks on a free agent, etc., etc. I mean, you kind of don't want that. So maybe the Vikings do feel like they kind of have to give him what he wants. I'm gonna leave you. I'm gonna ask you one last question, and then that can be that.
Okay.
It's a two-part question. What are your expectations of the Vikings for next season? And the second part of that question, what would you like to see from now till the end of trade deadline for the Vikings to be a legitimate contender? Because I don't think we're that far off, right? I feel like the NFC is the NFC. You've got two teams in San Francisco and the Eagles, who are probably the tier one teams, and then you've got us, the Cowboys, the Lions, the Seahawks, and I mean any NFC team can at any point get hot and get to the Super Bowl, right? But what are your expectations, and what would you need to see for us to be a legitimate contender?
Yeah. I think my expectations for the season are probably a little bit more optimistic than what like Vegas has us at. I think Vegas has us at 8.5 wins. I still think we're a 10, maybe 11 win team. I know the schedule is very difficult. A lot will depend on the rest of the NFC North, which is just a crapshoot in itself. But I do feel pretty optimistic about this team this year, especially with the firepower we have on offense. What I need to see to like really make me feel like they're a contender is I just need to see like dominant performances. I want to see us not only win games like we did last year, but win games convincingly. Last year, it was impressive what they did to win 11 one-score, wins or get that many in a row. But it was just disheartening because it never felt like we, and that's probably why people thought we were frauds, right? Because we never had convincing wins. And so through the first handful of weeks, it's going to be a tough test. And if we lose to the Chiefs, if we lose to the Eagles, I think that's fine. I'm okay with that. I want to see it be competitive, though, because those are the teams you're going to play in the playoffs. And if you really want to make that next step, you have to compete with them. And there was too many times last year where we won the one-score game, we'd go back, we'd play Dallas, we'd play Philly, and we'd get our butts whooped. And so I just really want to see convincing, full, put together games this season. And if we can do that, I think the sky's the limit.
I mean, where I stand is if our defense can go from 31st in the league to anywhere in the top 20, I think we'll be a very, very. I think we'll be a very, very good team. And obviously, you're not playing Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow every single week. So obviously, you've got that. You've got that as your advantage. But Matt, thank you so much for giving us the time.
Absolutely.
I'm sure, everyone that's listening really appreciates your input. Hopefully, we can do this a lot more often. Much appreciated. Yeah. Thank you very much. Let me just
absolutely, man. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for watching the Sports Room. If you enjoyed that, make sure you like, subscribe, and press the notification bell so you know the next time we upload. See you soon.